Hello, world, and thanks for listening for the first, or not first time, to Master English with Tim, the podcast where I help you learn English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying, and where I share my travel experiences with you. I'm Tim, native speaker of English from the United States, English teacher since 2005, polyglot, world traveler, writer, and podcaster for 91 episodes, if you include this week's episode. This week's episode is a late Christmas gift, or depending on where you live, it could be an early New Year's gift. In this week's episode, I'm going to tell you about my nearly 2 weeks of holiday travel with my family in France from December 15th to December 28th. During that time, I visited 3 different cities in 2 regions of France and generally had an amazing, if honestly completely exhausting time, seeing, hearing, and of course tasting the world's most visited country, where in the outgoing 2024, around 100 million people visited. That's over 30 million people more than the country's actual population. I mentioned earlier that I visited 2 regions in France. The first one everyone thinks of is, of course, Île-de-Paris, which is the department or region where Paris is located. But what's less known is that France is a country of regions, sometimes where, until only recently, languages other than French were spoken. One example of a region where a language other than French was spoken is Alsace, that's spelled Alsace. And Alsace is in the far east of France, close to Switzerland, and it was passed back and forth from German control to French control several times. And Alsace, like Switzerland, is a place where German and French culture and cuisine and traditions meet. Until 1945 or so, many people in Alsace spoke a language called Alsatian, which is a dialect of German that has a lot of French influence in it. That again is really similar to what you would find, for example, in Western Switzerland, where most people speak German, but there is a large amount of French influence in the language. According to relatively recent statistics, 2013, there are currently around 900,000 native speakers of Alsatian. That's probably gone down significantly in the last 11 years, and also, we should be a little bit careful with the term native speaker, because I'm pretty sure that, now I don't want to offend anybody who's a native speaker of Alsatian, but I'm pretty sure that there are almost no school textbooks printed in Alsatian, and that kids are not educated in school in Alsatian. I'm almost 100% certain of that. So it's not quite the same thing as being a native speaker of French. It would be more something like something that people speak at home. And all around the world, actually, these smaller languages are actually dying out. It's quite sad. Around the world, currently, there are around 5,000 languages spoken, and according to some linguists, by the end of this century, we will only have about 500 of them left. So again, Alsatian, there are still people who are around and alive speaking it, but it's not that common to hear it on the streets, and unfortunately, I did not hear it spoken on the streets and had to listen to it on YouTube to find out what it sounded like. So if you're curious about how Alsatian sounds, you can follow the link that I included in the description of this episode. Just follow the link and listen to it for a few minutes. Now, I know German, and I can say that it sounds a lot like German. A lot of the words are exactly the same, but there are also lots of places where I'm kind of scratching my head and saying, I really don't understand that. You can see, actually, a little bit of a trace of this Alsatian language on the street signs, in Strasbourg particularly. I got a little bit ahead of myself, or went a little bit into some detail there about the language there, and I should go back and say that there were 2 cities that we visited in Alsace. So we went to Strasbourg. I was only there for part of one day, but another part of my family stayed there for a couple of days. And Strasbourg is most famous, I guess, currently for being the seat of the European Parliament. We also spent a lot of time, several days in Colmar, that's Colmar, Colmar, which is a town about 40 minutes from Strasbourg by train, and which is quite a bit smaller and is known for its Christmas markets. In any case, in Strasbourg, you could see this trace, like I said, of the Alsatian language on some of the street signs. For example, one of the street signs said Seelosgasse. Now, in German, there's a word seelenlos, which means, if you take it apart, it's Seelen is souls, and los is less, like timeless or hopeless or helpless. So seelenlos means that something is completely empty. There are no people there. So the name of the street, again, was Seelosgasse, and Gasse means like an alley or a small street. So this was apparently a street where nobody lived, the soulless street or empty street. I said that Alsace is a place where you can see French and German cultures and tradition and cuisines meet. And it's not just in the language. You can also see that in the Christmas traditions, which honestly I associate a lot more with Germany. But of course, Alsace is still inside the French border. So some things that I saw there that I associated with Christmas are the Christmas markets, where you can get Glühwein, which is wine, hot wine served with spices, usually red, but also white, and some German-style food like some very, very fatty sausages and sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is a dish which is made of cabbage, which has been cut up into very small pieces and allowed to become sour. So yeah, in the Christmas markets, you could find Glühwein, you could find sauerkraut and sausages, which are of course very German, you could find hot chocolate, and you could find decorations for your Christmas tree, and Christmas sweaters and things like this. Another aspect of Alsace that looks quite German is the architecture. You have in Alsace what are called half-timbered houses. So timber is just another word for wood when it is used as a construction material, and you could see these very typical or perhaps stereotypical German-style houses where the exterior was white and had large pieces of brown painted timber on the outside, sometimes forming little patterns or letters, kind of like a letter X or crosses or things like this. So yeah, it looked that town looked quite German. Colmar did, as well as Strasbourg. Actually, Colmar is most famous in France for being a city of Christmas, and wherever you go, there are lots of Christmas decorations up, lots of Christmas trees. When my family and I went into our Airbnb, there were already 3 Christmas trees on the ground floor inside the door when we opened it, and there were more of them on every floor as we went up. There are lots and lots of tourists there, for Christmas, for the Christmas markets, also local people enjoying the fun, and there was a pretty good atmosphere, I've got to say, in spite of the large number of people. You can really see that a large part of the local economy is based on Christmas tourism. The obvious thing that I already said, the Christmas markets, and you also have just gift shops which sell a lot of Christmas-related stuff. Another feature of both Strasbourg and Colmar, more Colmar though, is canals. So both of the cities have canals running through them, and in Colmar, a few of them are just big enough that you can go on a boat ride on them. And these are small wooden boats with a little motor on the back and full of, 12 tourists or so, all sitting there and taking pictures and wearing Christmas sweaters and drinking hot chocolate and all that kinds of good stuff. In Strasbourg, they're quite a bit bigger, although they're still not large. And yeah, you can just walk around the city and enjoy the views over the canals and see these half-timbered houses and people walking around and having fun at the Christmas markets. Another cool thing that they had in the Christmas markets was a very big Ferris wheel. A Ferris wheel is something as a kind of attraction or ride that is made of a very, very big wheel, maybe 60 or 70 meters high, with little cabins on the outside of the wheel that you sit in. So we got in the Ferris wheel and went for a ride. Actually, it took us around maybe 4 or 5 times, and from very high up, we could look down and see the whole city. It was honestly a little bit scary because there was a little bit of a gap between the window or or the door there, and, well, the rest of the world outside far below. So yeah, we got to see a great view of the city from well above. I've got a picture of that in the link that I've got in the description of the episode. You can see how the city looks from, I won't quite say the sky, but from a high place Ferris wheel. Yet another thing that we did in Colmar was to visit a chocolate museum. Chocolate and Christmas have a pretty close alliance, and the Chocolate Museum expresses that. So there were a lot of Christmas-related chocolate exhibitions inside, and also a lot of stuff about the history of chocolate. I don't really have time to go into that, but I might make a separate episode about chocolate in the future, because I'm a big fan of chocolate, and especially drinking it. And I don't mean hot chocolate necessarily, but a chocolate drink that I have invented myself, and which I saw instructions for making in this chocolate museum. The most impressive thing, though, that they had in the chocolate museum was a 3/4, that's 3/4 model of an Italian racing car, a vintage Italian racing car. I don't know how much this car weighed, but it was made of solid chocolate. It had wheels made of chocolate, tires made of chocolate, steering wheel, headlights, you name it, all of it was made from solid milk chocolate. I think it was milk chocolate. Actually, that's a bit of a good question, because, if you're going to have a large car made of chocolate, you'd think that if you made it from milk chocolate, that the whole car would start to get unfresh and maybe make the place smell. Not sure about that. It definitely was not really a dark black color of chocolate, but in any case, it was very impressive. I'm not sure if the thing could actually roll. Obviously, the engine didn't work. If it did, the engine would heat up and it would start to melt immediately. I'm not sure if the thing could actually roll if you pushed it. But in any case, it was one of the most impressive things I've seen, and definitely the most impressive thing I've ever seen that's made of chocolate. After a few days in Colmar and Strasbourg, we went on the train to Paris, which is actually where we initially landed when we got to France. One of my favorite things, if not my favorite thing, in Paris was seeing my old friends. Actually, there were two ladies that I met years ago when I was an exchange student in Germany, and the last time I had seen them was 2008, and so I got to meet up with them for dinner, and we had a great time together. So it had been 16 years, and I was really touched that these people who had not seen me for such a long time took the time to come and meet me after all that time. That was just great. And another friend, actually. This guy was someone that I met while traveling in Poland in 2015, and so it had been, almost 10 years. We met, I guess, in the beginning of 2015. It had been almost 10 years, and we got to meet up and we exchanged some gifts. I gave him some sour and sweet, chewy candies from the United States, my favorite kind of candy. They're called Sour Patch Kids. And he gave me something that I had mentioned to him almost 10 years ago. So if you go to a supermarket in France, you can find all different kinds of jams. You can find cherry jam or quince jam. Quince is a fruit that's kind of between an apple and a pear, and it's very hard. I suggest you look that up if you don't know what it is. Quince, quince. There's apricot jam and all kinds of jams. But the one that I found was my favorite was actually not exactly a jam. It was a spread, kind of like a peanut butter, but it was made not of peanuts or almonds even. It was made of chestnuts. Chestnuts are a type of tree nut that you can find growing in the forested parts of France. So they make a kind of a spread from it. It's sweeter than most peanut butter, but there's variation. There is the most common and popular kind that you get in a glass jar at the supermarket. It's by a brand called Bonne Maman, which means nice mother, good mother. And that's a little bit sweeter than what my friend gave me. He gave me 9 tubes, each of them about 250 grams of this chestnut paste. And it was a little bit less sweet, which I really liked. And again, I was really touched that my friend, after all these years, remembered what I had mentioned to him once or twice such a long time ago. And I combined this chestnut paste, with my mom's cookies. She made a type of cookie that we would put jam on. We called them thumbprints. You'd push when she was cooking them, she'd push her thumb into the top of them when they were still soft, and then bake them, and so in that little print or that little hole that she made with her thumb, we would put in jam. And now I have a lot of chestnut spread to put in those thumbprint cookies. And I can also stir it into my yogurt, another one of the favorite things I can do with this thing. Back to Paris more generally, though, my impression of the city was kind of fresh. I had been there several times before, but every visit that I had was a long time ago. Like I said, the last time I had been there was 2008, which is a long time ago. And I did notice some changes from the previous time. There was definitely more English than before. You could see this on street signs, not necessarily government ones, but you could see it in museums. There was more English in the museums. There were more English menus. People were more willing to speak English with you, and sometimes people's English was significantly better than my French. My French is pretty decent, but it's not amazing. It's a little bit rusty, and so people would hear me speaking French, and sometimes they would switch to a very effective, pretty impressive English, which maybe was not so common in 2008, the last time I was there. There also were a lot more Spanish speakers than I had seen before. The Spanish speakers, though, that I saw, I didn't do a deep investigation on this, but they were all in one particular neighborhood. It was the 10th arrondissement. So Paris is made up of around 20 districts, which are called arrondissements. And we were in the 10th one, which is kind of central. And there were quite a few Spanish speakers there, Spanish restaurants, or, Hispanic, rather, restaurants, Peruvian, Argentinian, and so on. Things that had not changed. Well, two things. One was the insane level of culture there. I mean, wow. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling the amount of stuff that there is to see. We spent maybe 6 or 7 days there, and while hurrying around and trying to see as much as possible, not including one last day where we were quite exhausted and did almost nothing, it was not even remotely possible to see even all of the most important or most popular or famous things. There were several things that I missed, but that gives me a reason to go back. And in any case, there was just an absolutely staggering, unbelievable amount of stuff to see. The Louvre is just one example. You can get, for a very low price, actually, if you think about it, it's 80 euros for a 1-year membership, and it allows you to go as many times as you want. If you wanted to go into the Louvre and really look at things and enjoy them and not hurry through the whole place, you would have to go through around 860 rooms, if I remember the number correctly, and that would take you quite a long time. You might need all of the weekends, both days, in a whole year to really go through it slowly. So that's just one thing there. I think the Louvre might be bigger than the entire art collections. I'm sure that it's bigger than the entire art collections of a lot of other French cities. Which brings me to my second point, which is just how centralized Paris is. It is very dense, densely populated, and also dense with tourists now. It has lots of government buildings, Bank of France, you name it. Any government building is going to be there. And also the population is quite large. If we're talking about Paris itself, really proper Paris, it only has a population of about 2 million people, which you might say, wow, that's only a little bit bigger than, for example, Warsaw. But if you include the surrounding economic area, which is called a conurbation, I think I used that word actually in my episode about how to talk about cities, then you have something more like 10 million people, and it is quite closely packed in, lots of people close to each other, and lots of traffic. But also, the subway system, public transportation in general, is very solid, although a lot more confusing to use for a new user than, for example, let's say the Kiev metro system. There are lots of different lines. There are express trains, non-express trains. There are, kind of mid-range trains that take you across the conurbation or the economic area of the city, which use the same platforms. as some of the subways. And generally, if you're a first-time user, you've really got to pay attention, and there's still not quite enough English for you to figure it out too easily. Although the machines that you use to buy tickets are available in English, and there is some English signage, and some of it is just intuitive, so you can make your way around, especially if you're just used to using different cities' public transportation systems. But if you're from a smaller place and you go there, you might find it difficult and confusing. But in any case, the distance between stops is not very big, so you don't get out and find yourself walking back or walking forward a huge distance to get to the place that you're going to. And the other gaps are covered largely by buses, although we did not ride a bus a single time. So some of the more specific things we did. I will start with the food, and I don't really honestly know what high French cuisine is. You know, these things that are kind of in the popular imagination of France having this cuisine of absolutely exquisite and amazing dishes that you just can't believe how delicious they are. I didn't really go to any restaurants like that. You can do that and easily spend, 130 euros on one dish. Instead, we just enjoyed the food that was a little bit more quote-unquote democratic. So a couple things that we could get there for not too much money were the classic croque madame and croque monsieur. Those are two sandwiches that are very similar to each other. It's a piece of toast. On top of the toast, you have a piece of ham. On top of that, you have another piece of toast. On top of that, you have Emmental cheese, which is not one of these crazy, stinky, moldy French cheeses, but pretty strong flavor. And if it is a croque madame, it has a fried egg on top, not completely cooked through. So not completely cooked through, kind of like one of those Georgian khachapuri that has the egg on the top of it. And the croque monsieur is the same thing, but does not have the egg. Very flavorful and quite filling. Another thing is, of course, crepes. So some people call these pancakes, but they're not really pancakes. A pancake is about a centimeter thick or so, and if you cut a pancake open, and you look at the pancake from the side, you'll see lots of little holes with air in them. With a crepe, that's not so. Crepe is maybe only a millimeter thick, and it does not have nearly as much air in it. And also, it is usually filled with either sweet or non-sweet, that is, savory ingredients. So you might have jam or honey, something like this, chocolate, Nutella, and if it's a savory one, it could be ham, it could be an egg, it could be some cheese or spinach or what have you. And we enjoyed several of those. That's actually probably the best way to save some money or not spend too much money when you go to, a restaurant in Paris. Walking along the street in a lot of places, you could smell coffee being roasted. We had some of the coffee, and it was, of course, very flavorful, very good. And what else could we find there? Oh, right, of course, the stinky cheeses that I mentioned before. There are stinky cheeses, and there are extremely stinky cheeses, and we opted mainly for the first one. We didn't go crazy on the ones that smell really bad, although we did try some of them. And they're not for everybody, but I personally think they're okay. I wouldn't make a huge habit of eating them, but they were pretty good. So what are some of the things we did? One of the favorite things that we all did together was to just go for a simple walk along the Seine. The Seine is the river that goes through the center of Paris. That's Seine. So just walking along that, you can see the Louvre, you can see another Ferris wheel. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see that from the sidewalk that goes along the Seine. One nice thing about going for a walk along the Seine is that you have two options. One option is that you can walk on the sidewalk that is at street level. And actually, that's not what probably you should do. You do get a better view, at least of the city and how people live there, but the other option is, and which has far less traffic because some of these streets are really clogged and just full of tourists. The other option is that you go down some steps and there's another large walkway on both sides of the Seine that allows you to just walk along the river without nearly as much foot traffic. And that way you can also look more closely at some of the many impressive bridges that go over the Seine. You can see several pictures of those in the link in the description of the episode. As I mentioned, we all went to the Louvre actually in a couple different trips, so not everybody at the same time, which is fortunate because the place is really, at times, very full of people, and if you have a large group, particularly with children in the group, it's easy to lose track of each other and then kind of go into a little bit of a panic. Oh my God, where's my kid? Or where's my nephew? Or whoever. And the reverse also, even, just as bad, the kid thinking, where's my mom? Or where's my uncle? Or whoever. But the works of art, of course, are just absolutely impressive. You have all different periods, all different areas of the globe. You can see the Mona Lisa, of course, and one of the people I was traveling with said that for them, the most impressive thing that they saw about the Mona Lisa, and in the Louvre in general, was, maybe not in the Louvre in general, but the thing that was most surprising for them about the Mona Lisa was just the amount of people standing around there with their phones, with the phone held up in the air, taking pictures of it. At any one time, there were at least 100 people standing around taking pictures of the thing, and it was kind of far away. If you wanted to get close to it, you really had to be patient, or you had to be pushy. You had to push your way through the crowd. Pushy in a literal sense, not just in your character, but actually push your way through a bit of a crowd to get close to the thing and take a picture of it. Was it so dense and close that you really had to shove people out of the way hard? No, but you might feel a little bit uncomfortable depending on what kind of personality you have. There was medieval art, there was Egyptian art, there was art from Latin America, from Africa, from all over. It was just absolutely impressive. I don't honestly know where to start, and a place like that, for me personally, largely just leaves kind of an impression which doesn't really... If I look at my own impression of a place like that, it's hard for me to take it apart and say what the impression consists of or what the ingredients are. For example, this particular painting, made me think or feel this. No, it was just kind of a general sense of astonishment and amazement at how much stuff there was there, and some jealousy, honestly, that people who live there are able to visit there anytime they have free time without taking a flight across the Atlantic Ocean. Another place that I visited not far from the Louvre was a place called La Conciergerie. I don't know exactly how that translates into English, but in any case, it is a church which is partly underground. When you enter it, you go down some steps, and in this case, there was a large art exhibition inside. It's not a very big church by, I guess, Parisian standards. If you think of Paris, you might think of huge cathedrals that are just, several hundred square meters. Not so this place. But inside, it was interesting because there was an exhibition of art from the African country of Guinea. And that was kind of unexpected, Guinean art inside of a church. And so it was an interesting mix or blend of cultures there. There were a lot of Africans walking around taking a look at the art, and there were some really impressive things in there. The ones that I liked the most were things that were made out of rescued pieces of trash. People often say that modern art, they just say modern art, and instantly everyone says, oh, of course, someone has painted a black square on a red background and asked for $1 million. Well, that exists, sure, but I'm not sure if the stuff that I saw that was made from rescued trash fulfills or satisfies a formal definition of modern art, but it's art and it's modern, and I really liked it. One piece that I really liked that you can see a picture of, actually 3 pictures of, no, 2, I'll explain, is a woman who is wearing an unbelievably impressive dress. This is a sculpture. A woman wearing an unbelievably impressive dress that, if you look closely at it, you will realize is made out of African rice bags. So in Africa, they transport rice, I guess, and a woman from Guinea told me this. They transport large quantities of rice, I guess 100 kilos or something, in these big white plastic and fiber bags. So the longest part of the woman's dress, which went back maybe 10 meters or so, was made of these sacks of rice that had been rescued and turned into a dress and sewed together or sewn together. And on the outside of it were the bottoms, cut off bottoms of green soda bottles. I guess they were 7-Up bottles. And it was just absolutely beautiful. It sounds like it's made out of trash, and it is, but that was the great thing about it, was that they took trash and made something amazing and beautiful with it. If I recall correctly, her eyes were made from reused or rescued coffee capsules, which of course are famously thrown away in huge quantities. There were also some sculptures which were made of rescued car tires. I don't quite remember what these things looked like. I don't remember what they represented, but I do remember just being impressed by these kind of sad and depressing looking creatures made out of rescued tires. And yeah, it was just, there was also a light show inside. There was a movie going on, and just an interesting mix of people in there. At the back, there was a little bookstore, and I really had to not spend more money in there. I'm always tempted by books, and I don't always end up reading all the books that I buy. And there was one particular book that I was thinking about buying. It was in French, and it was called Sacred Texts of Black Africa. And I was sorely tempted. Sorely tempted means very, very badly tempted, strongly tempted to buy this book. Even though it wasn't very big, I thought, my luggage is full. I'm spending a lot of money. It costs about $15 to get a sandwich. So no, I did not buy it. Another place that we visited was Versailles. Versailles is the palace, the royal palace, that was, the palace where the kings of France lived for several hundred years. It's located outside of Paris. It's about a 40-minute ride in the RER. That's the kind of sub-regional train that takes you from central Paris to, the economic area of Paris outside. And it's just an absolutely impressive building. On the outside, at the top of the building, on the kind of area around the upper windows, it's covered in gold. And you can imagine how it must have looked on a sunnier day. The sun did come out a little bit later, and it was absolutely beautiful seeing it. But on a truly sunny day, it must be absolutely spellbinding, amazing to see something that beautiful. Inside, there were lots of works of art, mainly paintings of the people who lived there. So people looking kind of proud and calm and absolutely certain of themselves, and with crazy hairdos, and absolutely luxurious libraries and insane massive beds and rooms that are covered with paintings, walls and ceiling, and just generally a feeling of utter opulence. Opulence is extreme wealth, as I mentioned, I believe, a couple episodes ago. You can see quite a few pictures of the inside of Versailles in the link in the description of the episode. One thing that was difficult and honestly unpleasant about Versailles was the number of people inside. Now, one of the people I was traveling with said that they had visited this place now many years ago, almost 30 years ago, and said that it was so empty at the time that they were able to walk down the halls alone and jump into the bed of Louis XIV, the Sun King, the richest king of France, and also kind of the most infamous because of the luxury that he lived in and his knowledge that the luxury and the spending that he was engaging in would probably destroy the country's government. In any case, this person jumped into the bed and nobody noticed. There was no security there, and that would have been absolutely impossible. The place was absolutely packed with people, and we didn't really have control at all times of how fast we were walking. We're kind of walking in step or in sync with the other people inside, and sometimes we felt like, if you see a picture of like Roman soldiers who are marching together into battle, that was how close we were at times. It was, as I think about it now, it makes me feel kind of claustrophobic. Versailles also had a cookie shop and ice cream shop in there. We enjoyed some of the cookies. I believe I had pistachio. Pistachio is that little green nut. Very delicious. And the gift shop had things that, said Versailles on them and were not terribly expensive, honestly. There was a t-shirt that said Versailles, France, or Versailles, Paris, and was made out of very, very soft cotton. Didn't check what it's actually made of, but it just looked extremely comfortable. And little pens that say on Versailles it. So if you want to do your snob thing, then you could easily buy, a baseball hat that said Versailles on it, which seems to me kind of ironic. You're in Versailles and you want to do your snob thing and you get a baseball hat. Maybe it's a little bit ironic, a little bit hipstery, but in any case, you can get all kinds of Versailles gear there in the shop. Another thing that we saw was the Arc de Triomphe, or Triumphal Arch, which is, I'm not exactly sure where it is. It's actually So if I think about it now, it's south of the River Seine a little bit, and it was about a 45 or 50-minute walk from our hotel, so it was quite a hike, and it was really worth it. I don't know how tall it is. Maybe it's 90 meters or something. No, that'd be extremely tall. It's tall enough to be impressive. Let's put it that way. And it's kind of a central point in the city because if you get to the top, you see the Arc de Triomphe, and, written on it are all these places that Napoleon defeated or conquered, took control of, and then gave control of to his brothers, who became kind of satellite kings. And there are little sculptures on the side of it, of people doing battle and stuff. And honestly, it's a little bit ironic. I mean, you have this Arc of Triumph, and in the end, Napoleon lost. Of course, he died in, I think, 1815 or so. Well, he has an Arc of Triumph, but he was defeated. So in any case, you stand by the Arc of Triumph, and you can look down one street, which leads to a place called La Défense. La Défense is kind of like I don't want to call it a French Wall Street, because I don't think that it's as oriented towards finance as Wall Street is. Wall Street is pretty much strictly finance, and La Défense is more generally like a very concentrated place of business where there are, very big, impressive buildings. If you look in the opposite direction, you turn around and you look down the Champs-Élysées. The Champs-Élysées is just an impressive, big, wide avenue with very expensive stores on both sides of it. By expensive stores, I mean stores of brands like Dior, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton, and I think also Tag Heuer watches. But you also had more, common brands like Adidas, On running shoes, and even Levi's. I was kind of surprised, really, Levi's on Champs-Élysées. Maybe the rent there isn't as expensive as my imagination is telling me it is. One thing that really surprised me and made me laugh was the presence of a restaurant there. I'm being kind of generous with the term restaurant, and the restaurant was called Five Guys. So if you're in the United States or, well, anywhere, the inner circle of hamburger hell is, of course, McDonald's. Slightly better, significantly, noticeably better in quality is Burger King. And then outside of that, you have Five Guys, which is, kind of decent. I'm not a hamburger eater. I haven't eaten one in years. That's not quite true. But, yeah, it was still surprising to see a restaurant like that on Champs-Élysées. Speaking of which, that reminds me that when you leave the Louvre, there is a giant shopping mall that you have to go through. Now, maybe there's another exit that I didn't know about that would have allowed me and the people with me to avoid this massive underground shopping mall, but we did not find that other exit, and it was confusing to go through it and to get out of it. And in that shopping mall, I was absolutely shocked to see a McDonald's in the Louvre. Come on, that's absolutely wild. And on the Champs-Élysées, you can see all kinds of people that are dressed really well, in extreme fashion, and also just people like us, walking around in jeans and people not thinking about anything in particular, but the fashion element there was definitely very strong. We also went back later at night, and since it was Christmas time, there were lights up on all of the trees that are along this big avenue, and there was also a very big, impressive Christmas tree. It wasn't a huge tree, but it was just impressive. It was in an already beautiful place. It was quite tall, and it had those golden spherical or ball ornaments on it, and just was absolutely stunning to behold, to look at. Being there also reminded me of the first time that I was there many years ago when I saw the Tour de France bicycle race finish there one summer. So it brought back some memories too. One last thing that I saw, or partially saw, was the church Notre Dame, or in English pronunciation, people say Notre Dame. I prefer the French one, Notre Dame, which means Our Lady. They're referring to Mary. And this church, Mary the Mother of Jesus, that is. And this church is kind of famous in recent years because in 2019, it suffered a major fire and actually just burnt down. The roof of it burnt through, as I recall. And at the time, everybody was absolutely shocked that this had happened. And people in France were very sad about it, around the world, because it's such a famous place that it's kind of something that that everyone feels some connection to, maybe. And the French president at the time promised that it would be rebuilt in 5 years. And actually, just a few weeks ago, it was completed. They did complete the reconstruction of Notre Dame. When I got there, there were still like metal skeletons or like ladders all over the outside of it. There was still a big construction crane overhead, and there was a long line out front, which is why I only partially saw it. I only saw the outside of it. I should have been more ambitious and gotten up early one morning and just gone in before the lines got there, but the lines were probably, since they kind of snaked around the place in front of the church, they were probably over a kilometer long. It was just, I might be exaggerating, but I might not. It was absolutely huge, the line that was there. So that's one thing I kind of semi-missed. Another thing that I definitely missed was the Eiffel Tower. I did see it from a distance. I have been up in it before, but it would have been nice to go up into the thing again, even though now it costs about 35 euros to go to the top. I mean, somebody might say, 35 euros, that's crazy. Why don't they just let you go for free? Well, in reality, if you don't do that, you're going to have absolutely huge lines, and that's also a price. So you're either going to pay in money or you're going to pay in time, and in some way, the price that they're asking is actually more fair to more people. At night, the Eiffel Tower is lit up. There are lights all over it, and it can be seen from a long distance away. Another thing that I wanted to see and was very close to seeing was the Musée d'Orsay. So Musée is museum, and Orsay, well, that's just the name of the museum. And it is a museum that has more art from the 19th and 20th centuries, so it has more Impressionism inside of it. I believe that it has, now you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that it has Van Gogh's Starry Night inside, which I would have loved to have seen. Again, though, these are things that I can see the next time. And there are also, I'm only giving you a short list of things that I would have loved to have seen. There is so much stuff there, and the people who live there right next to it are just so fortunate. So, two things that I have to admit detracted from or were negatives about Paris and about France in general right now, this particular visit. And that is two things. One is the amount of tourists. I said about almost every location that there were large numbers of people there, and according to statistics that I read, tourism in France went up from 2021 to 2022, so a couple years ago, 64%. And the next year, 2022 to 2023, it went up another 26, almost 26%. And if you add those together, compounding them, that's more than double in just a few years. And you could absolutely feel in certain places that you're just really crowded. The other thing was the prices. It was not outrageously expensive, but, it was still pretty pricey. And especially if you went to a place that was right next to a museum. Like, you get tired, you're next to a museum and think, I'll just sit down here. It'll only be a couple extra years. No, it was not a couple extra years. It was really quite expensive. If you were careful, it was not too hard. And if you decide to go to Paris at some point, or France in general at some point, when you choose your hotel, choose a place that has a kitchen, and prepare to avoid, going out for restaurants every single meal. One thing I forgot about the cuisine. Wow, we had some impressive ice cream. We went to an ice cream shop. It's called Bertillon, I think, Berthillon, Bertillon, and it's close to Notre Dame, about 5-minute walk from there. And it has just a really impressive range of flavors. Not a huge number of flavors, but just really interesting stuff. You have your standard ones like, your vanilla and chocolate and one of my favorites, coconut. But they also had blood orange. They had another one. It was vine peach. I don't even know what a vine peach is. I tried to look it up and got distracted and haven't looked up. I guess I'll do that after this episode. And one of the people I was with took an ice cream that was made of Armagnac, so like alcohol, and prunes, and I believe vanilla. So the base was, vanilla, but it had Armagnac in it and pieces of prunes, and the flavor was just so intense. It was absolutely amazing. It also is pretty alcoholic, and so if you're there in the morning like we were, that one might not be the best choice. So that's really about all of the places and impressions that I have that I can think of right now. I suspect, I haven't looked at the time, but I think this is going to be quite a long episode. But I had an absolutely epic time with my family, and I would also like to thank, if they're listening, thank one of my brothers for subsidizing and, renting an extra large Airbnb and an extra large, well, two of them actually, which made it a lot easier for me to go there. And to my dad, who also helped pay for part of the trip. And without them, I would not have been able to do that, to take this trip at all. So thank you to everyone who was involved, who went with me, and who met me there, friends, family, and to everybody who listened today. Thanks, everyone, and have a great New Year. If you are in a part of the world where Christmas is more important than New Year, then I wish you a merry late Christmas, and I will see you again on next Monday.